Ladies and gentlemen, 5 years ago, I was working 16 hours a day and was the bottleneck in every decision in my business. I couldn't take a vacation, I couldn't get sick, and I definitely could not scale. Today, my team runs most of my companies without me. I work maybe 4 to 6 hours a day, and we're doing 10 times the revenue. The secret wasn't hiring more people. It was completely changing how I thought about delegation. And today, I'm going to show you the exact system that transformed me from a micromanaging workaholic into a strategic CEO. Now let me take you to my lowest point as a business owner. I was working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm handling everything from sales calls, managing projects, content, doing customer service, writing all the proposals, and managing the social media accounts. Literally doing everything. I remember getting a text from a client at 2 a.m. asking for project updates, and I immediately jumped out of bed and hopped right back onto my laptop. I had convinced myself that this is what entrepreneurship looked like. That if I wasn't suffering, I wasn't succeeding. That if I wasn't doing everything myself, I wasn't building a real business. But the breaking point came when I got food poisoning and I couldn't work for over 7 days. My entire business basically stopped. Clients were confused, projects were delayed, and my team didn't know what to do without constant direction. That's when I realized I hadn't built a real business. I'd built an expensive job that I couldn't escape from. I was the CEO, but I was also the biggest liability. Here's the paradox that every entrepreneur faces. You need to delegate to scale, but you can't delegate effectively when you're overwhelmed with work. It's like trying to teach someone to swim while you're drowning. You don't have the time or mental space to properly train people, so you end up doing all the work yourself because it's quote unquote faster. But here's what I learned. The reason delegation fails isn't because you don't have good people. It's because you don't have good systems. Most entrepreneurs try to delegate tasks, but that doesn't work. You need to delegate outcomes. You need to delegate decision making. You need to delegate ownership. The goal isn't to have people around you who do what you tell them. The goal is to have people around you who think like you think. And that requires a completely different approach to building a successful team. You see, I developed what I call the 4-level delegation framework. Most people try to jump straight to level 4, which is why they fail. You've got to start with level 1. Do exactly this. You give specific instructions for specific tasks. Most delegation stops here. Then you could go to level 2 where you solve the problem, but instead of you doing all the problem solving, you give your team members the problem and let them figure out how to solve it. Then you can move on to level 3, own the outcome. This is where you give your team member responsibility for an entire area and let them manage it completely. And finally, level 4, think like an owner. The team member makes decisions as if it's their business and not just their job. You see, the key is moving people systematically through each level, not skipping steps. You can't delegate ownership to someone who hasn't yet proven that they can follow instructions. Let's break it all down, beginning with level 1. Level 1 is where most entrepreneurs get stuck because they think it's beneath them. But this level is crucial for establishing trust and standards. I personally started by documenting every process in my business, not just the big processes, every little thing. How to respond to client emails, how to format proposals, how to update project statuses. I created what I call Ibrahim in a box. Detailed instructions for how I would handle every situation that came up regularly. The goal wasn't to make people robots. The goal was to establish a baseline of quality and consistency so I could start trusting people with bigger responsibilities. Level 1 teaches people your standards. Without clear standards, delegation becomes chaos. You can't expect people to read your mind about how you want things done. You have to show them. Level 2 is where real delegation starts. Instead of giving people tasks, you give them problems to solve. So instead of telling a team member, send this email to this client, I would say the client's confused about the project timeline, figure out how to clarify this and prevent similar confusion in the future. This level teaches people to think, not just execute. It develops their problem-solving skills and starts building their confidence in decision-making. But here's the key. You have to resist the urge to tell them how to solve the problem. You define the outcome you want, not the method for achieving it. You've got to give your team member the problem, the desired outcome, and the deadline, and let them figure out the how. This is where most control freak entrepreneurs struggle. You have to let people solve problems differently than you would solve them as long as they get the right result. Different methods, similar outcomes. Now let's move on to level 3. This is where delegation becomes super powerful. You give people ownership of entire outcomes, not just individual problems. Instead of managing individual client relationships, I gave my account manager ownership of client satisfaction and retention. Instead of managing individual marketing campaigns, I gave my media buyers ownership of lead generation and conversion. At this level, they're not just solving problems, they're preventing problems. They're thinking strategically about their area of responsibility. But level 3 requires clear metrics and regular check-ins. You can't just hand over responsibility and disappear. You need dashboards, weekly reviews, and clear success metrics. The key is measuring outcomes, not activities. I personally don't care how many hours someone works or how many tasks they can complete. I care about the results they produce. And when you delegate outcomes instead of tasks, people start thinking like owners instead of employees. Now let's talk about level 4. Level 4 is the holy grail of delegation. This is where team members start thinking like business owners, not just employees. They're not just managing their areas, they're looking for ways to improve the entire business. They're identifying opportunities, solving problems before they become problems, and making decisions as if it's their money on the line. To put it into perspective, my head of sales, Leon, doesn't just close deals. He identifies new market opportunities and recommends changes to our service offerings. My fulfillment director, Solange, doesn't just manage projects. She identifies insufficiencies in our processes and implements solutions that save us money. At level 4, delegation becomes multiplication. Instead of having one person thinking about your business, you have multiple people thinking about your business. But I will say level 4 requires profit sharing, equity distribution, or big salaries. People won't think like owners unless they're rewarded like owners. You can't expect ownership thinking without ownership incentives. Now, here's exactly how I implemented this system and the timeline it took to get there. Months 1 and 2, I documented every single process and hired the right people for level 1 tasks. This was painful and slow, but extremely essential. Months 3 and 4, I started giving level 2 problem-solving responsibilities to people who had proven reliable at level 1. Once I got to months 5 and 6, I promoted the best problem solvers to level 3 outcome ownership with clear metrics and accountability. And finally, once I got to months 7 through 12, I developed level 4 strategic thinkers through profit sharing and increased decision-making authority. The key was patience. I didn't rush people through levels just because I wanted to delegate faster. Fast delegation leads to slow results. Slow delegation leads to fast results. The hardest part of this process wasn't watching my team. It was changing my own mindset about control and perfectionism. I had to accept that people would do things differently than I would. I had to accept that some mistakes would happen. I had to accept that short-term efficiency might decrease for long-term scalability. But the biggest mindset shift was realizing that my job as CEO isn't to do all the work. It's to build systems that ensure the work gets done without me. I had to go from the mindset of I need to do this to I need to build a system for this. From no one can do this as well as me to how can I teach someone to do this better than me? From this is faster if I do it myself to this is an investment in future capacity. Your ego wants you to be indispensable, but your business needs you to be dispensable. The results of implementing the system were honestly better than I expected. Within 12 months, I went from working 16 hours a day to working 6 hours a day. But our revenue increased substantially because my team was handling more clients and delivering better results. I was able to take my first real vacation. My stress levels decreased dramatically because I wasn't the single point of failure anymore. But the biggest result was that my business became valuable, not just profitable. A business that depends on one person isn't really a business. It's a job with unlimited liability. Now I have a business that could run without me, which means I have a business that someone else would want to buy. And my team is happier because they have real responsibility and growth opportunities, not just tasks to complete. When you delegate properly, everybody wins. You, your team, and your business. If you're currently working 16 hours a day and feeling like you can't escape your business, I understand, I've been there. But working harder isn't the solution. Building better systems is the solution. And delegation is the most important system you'll ever build. Your business should serve your life, not consume it. But that only happens when you build a business that can run without you. Stop trying to be the hero in every story. Start building a team of heroes who can write their own stories. Delegate systematically, measure outcomes relentlessly, and reward ownership thinking generously. Your freedom is on the other side of effective delegation. Start building that system today. Now, if you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.